Hey everyone, welcome back to Staying Connected. This is Katie, your host, and today I have Megan with me who's going to share her story with vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or VEDS, which I also have. So thank you, Megan, for coming on and sharing your story.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, when were you diagnosed with VEDS and how did that happen?
So I was officially diagnosed with VEDS about a year and a half ago, June of 2018. But the diagnosis came on um, probably about 6 months prior in January, about 2 years ago, with the death of my brother. He was 39 years old at the time, and he lived in Australia. He had just moved over there about 6 months prior. And so I had gotten a call in January from my dad letting me know the news that my brother had passed away suddenly. And so it was quite a shock to everybody because, like I said, he was perfectly healthy. He was only 39.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and not knowing at that time how he had passed away, all we had known was that it was completely sudden in his apartment. And, he didn't even have time to get to the phone, So whatever it was happened very quickly, which is comforting to know, but at the same time, at that point, it was still a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when the autopsy came back in, it was determined that he had had an aortic dissection right near the heart, which is why it was so quick and sudden for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so at that time, I really didn't think much about it. We kind of thought it must have been just a freak thing that kind of happened. And it wasn't until the um, coroner over in Australia made the comment to us that, it's really rare for someone so young to have had this done, that she usually sees this happen in people that are much older in their 70s and 80s. And, she brought up the suggestion that it's possible there might have been a genetic link that is the reason that this happened. And so she just kind of suggested that it wouldn't be a bad idea for family members to kind of follow up and just see if there was anything. So we kind of took that, and I didn't really think too much about it. I didn't think the possibility at that point was too great that it was anything. However, my dad kind of played the guilt trip on me at that point and said, you need to go to the doctor and you need to at least examine what it could be. You're my last living family member at this point, and I want to keep you around for a while. And
Mm-hmm.
so, of course, that tugged at my heartstrings, and so I told him okay and made some appointments with my doctor, and they referred me to a cardiologist at our hospital, and we went there um, mostly because of the way my brother died and where the dissection was. They figured, well, maybe it had something to do with the heart. And so we went in, and the doctors at that point didn't really think anything of it. They were kind of, listening to my story, but not really taking me too seriously at first. And um, I'm the kind of person where I always go into appointments and I have like my list of things that I want to say and the things I want to talk about. But yet when I get into the appointments, a lot of times I kind of freeze up and I forget what I want to say, um, which always frustrates me. And I end the appointments and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't say what I wanted to. But, um, so that was kind of happening. But luckily, my husband was able to join me for the appointment. And so we're sitting there, and he totally stepped in and kind of advocated for me at that point. And he's like, listen, this is what's happened. We're not leaving here until we at least get some tests on the books. So they scheduled me for an echo. And so I went in to do that, and they did the appointment and checked out my heart, and everything looked great. There was nothing to be concerned about. And they said the flow was good and there were no dissections or anything. So I felt really good leaving that appointment. And they had scheduled a CT of my abdomen to kind of do like basically from my neck all the way down to my legs area. And that was scheduled for a couple months later. So life kind of went on for a little bit. And I kind of honestly put the appointment to the back of my mind because um, I I was worried about the echo, and so since that came back good, I wasn't really too concerned about anything else. But I figured, I'd keep the appointment and go anyway and have it done. And so a few months later, I went for the CT scan, and at that time, my husband was out of town. He's military, and so he often leaves for chunks of time. And so this happened to be a time when he was out of town. Um, and my kids were at the house by themselves because the appointment was only supposed to be about an hour, so I kind of just left him home alone to go to it, and went in and had it done and did the appointment. And the tech at the time said, okay, we've got everything. Just wait out in the waiting room for a few minutes. We just want to make sure all the images are clear enough, and we'll let you know, when you can head on home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and sat out in the waiting room, and probably within 3 or 4 minutes, two doctors came out together, and they had that like walking with a purpose kind of walk, and they flanked me on both sides. There was one sat on one side and the other on the other side, and so that kind of alarmed me. And they said, we just reviewed your images, and we see that you also have an aortic dissection, just like your brother did, as well as iliac dissections, and we need to admit you to the hospital right now. And so, of course, that set me kind of into a panic mode, obviously,
Yeah.
because all I really heard at that point was like dissections and same as your brother, and, get you in right now. So
Right.
I'm thinking a million things at this point. And the main thing I kind of thought of, honestly, was because at the hospital that we were at, cell phone reception is horrible. Like my phone does not work in there whatsoever. And so I told them, I'm like, well, before I go anywhere, I need to, figure out, like the mom and me came out, and I'm like, I need to get a hold of my kids and figure out if I'm going to be here for a while. I need to figure out them, my husband's out of town, and like all these like mom planning modes came in,
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first thing. And they were so worried that they were like, okay, well, you can walk right outside the hospital and make the calls, but we're going to have the doctor come with you. So that even, sent me into panic mode more, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? This doctor is like escorting me everywhere. And, once I finally made the calls, and I called my husband, and of course, Murphy's Law, things always happen when he's away. And so he starts worrying, and I'm trying to calm him down and just saying, let's just wait until we know for sure. He at that point, he's like, I'm packing my bags, I'm coming home. And I'm like, hold on, let's get some answers first. And so I got checked in, and they had a team down around me doing all these tests. And I had all the emotions going through, like, oh my God, am I going to die right now? Is this what it's like? And what's going on? And this big hullabaloo of everything going on. And they did decide that it wasn't anything life-threatening at that moment. My dissections, luckily, are low enough where they kind of bypass all my organs.
Mm-hmm.
So they determined that I didn't need anything done that night. And it was probably about a 5 or 6 hours that I was in the ER. I went in for like an hour appointment and ended up being in there, 5 or 6 hours. And
Yeah.
so I got home that night, and we went ahead and made an appointment with the geneticist there. And so that happened a couple weeks later. I went in, and he was great. He was amazing, and kind of talked me through the process. And he did a physical test on me and checked for hypermobility. And I'd always kind of noticed that I was a little bit more flexible in my hands and in my elbows, especially. I always kind of like I would always say that's my party trick, oh, you guys want to see something weird? Look, like, my elbows, like what they can do, kind of thing, never thinking anything other than that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so he did that Brighton scale test on me, and he told me, he's like, well, you checked about 5 out of the 9 boxes. So that's a sign right there. And he's like, I would like to do a genetic test and test for something called vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so that was the first time I had ever heard of that term, that word. I had never heard of it before. So I agreed, and we did the blood test, and he told me it would take about a month to get the results. So in the meantime, of course, I do what I always do when I don't know something, and I research the heck out of it. I went home and I just like started Googling everything I could on it and finding as much information on it, which is not a whole lot out there. There's not a whole lot out there at that point, but
Yeah.
I got all the information I could. And what was really interesting is, like, as I'm finding these things and as I'm reading and like hearing people's stories, like, I can't tell you how many times I was like, that sounds like me. Like, that sounds exactly like something that I've been through or I experienced, or, the easy bruising, that a lot of people get, and the flexibility, and the silly thing like sleeping with your eyelids half open. That was something that I always got made fun of, growing up. They're like, oh, that's so weird. Why do you do that? And I just always kind of thought it was a family thing because I did it and my brother did it and my mom, we all kind of did it, and we all had all these same physical features. We all bruised super easily. We all were flexible, like all these things. And I just chalked it up to like our family genes. I didn't think anything other than that about it. But
Yeah.
as I was reading all this stuff, it just was like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. I get that. And so about a month later, we were just ending our family vacation that we take every year to our favorite place on this lake, and it was a special trip too because we went and we scattered my brother's ashes in the lake, just like we had with my mom's a few years earlier. And so, the place has special meaning. And so we had a really good vacation, but an emotional one. We were kind of saying goodbye to my brother and everything like that. And so the day we left to come home, we were driving home, and I got the phone call from the doctor, and he said that the test results were in. And, that's when I got the actual confirmation that I did have vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And while it was devastating news to hear, I honestly didn't cry at that time. I almost felt kind of validated. Like at that moment, it was like everything that I had gone through over the years kind of made sense, and all the other ailments that I had had over the years kind of made sense. And the times that I had gone into other doctors and told them like these issues that I was having, and getting told that there was no reason why I was having this, like everything kind of got validated for me at that moment, if that makes sense,
Oh, yeah.
Um,
What kind of
so
things had you been through?
quite a few, like over the years, and kind of all different random things where, you wouldn't have pieced them together, honestly, and I do get that. But one of the main things that I've dealt with since high school really is migraines. I have migraines quite often, and I'm on a pretty good plan now to where they're so much better than what they used to be. But at the height of it, I would be getting migraines 3 to 4 times a week.
Oof.
It was debilitating. It was horrible. And, I didn't want to be on a bunch of medications and a bunch of different things. And, I tried everything holistically first. I tried chiropractic, I tried acupuncture, I tried, massage. And while they all helped, nothing ever helped well enough to like reduce the amount that I had, and
Yeah.
I've had 2 radial ablation procedures done, which are like nerve block procedures to where they will basically go into the base of your skull and your neck and cauterize the nerve endings to basically like deaden the sensation so the pain isn't there. And
And that
it's
helps
not a
with migraines, or is that also for like muscle tension, or what is?
it helps with migraines, and it also helps with the way that migraines my migraines work is that they typically start at like the base of my neck.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of neck issues that kind of go along with the migraines. So for me, it's been a big help. They'll just go in and they kind of deaden it, and it just kind of basically stops the nerve pain from reaching up through and making a full migraine sometimes.
Okay.
So I mean, it's not a fun procedure. It's it's it has helped, which is great. But on top of that, I've also been doing Botox for a couple years, which for me personally has been the biggest relief for migraines. I was very skeptical about it at first, but I was at the point in my life where I was like, I will try anything. And I tried it, and for me personally, that has been the biggest help in my migraines. But I mean, that's been since high school, so over 20 years that I've been dealing with this constant pain, and now I'm down to about 3 to 4 migraines a month, which is still not fun, but compared to weekly and monthly, I mean, that's a huge improvement.
Yeah.
But it's a pain management regimen that I'm going to have to keep up on for life. And at the time, it was completely separate, and no doctors really kind of correlated anything with why might I be getting these migraines? What's the reason I'm getting these? And while nothing's ever been confirmed, many doctors that I've talked to since then feel that, my migraines could be amplified due to my VEDS.
Yeah.
So, that right there is kind of validating, to just kind of know that I'm not exaggerating, like I felt a lot of times going in, and they would just be like, oh, you can live with it, or, it is what it is kind of thing. And along with the migraines, I have like some joint pain
Hmm.
to where, I have to do certain things in the morning sometimes just to kind of like get my body going. I have a traction machine that I use on my neck, that helps with the neck pain. So I'll get up and I'll kind of do that. And I do yoga, which is great.
Hmm.
And that usually gets me going. Um, so that's kind of one thing. And then the dissections that I do have, when they did find my dissections, it was actually really interesting because they made the comment that I had probably had the dissections for a while. And when I asked them how they were able to determine that, they said that with the dissection, it's kind of like a cut, like if you get a paper cut to where, you kind of have that little flap of skin. Um, and that little flap of skin on the artery had healed enough to where it was a little bit thicker. And so kind of like counting rings on a tree, the thicker it is, you can kind of tell how old it is. And he said it's kind of like that. And since the flap of the tear on my dissections was a little bit thicker than the rest of it, they are assuming that I've had those dissections for probably a very long time.
Wow.
Yeah, probably from my pregnancy. Not they don't know for certain, but I was pregnant 13 plus years ago. So, I've had these dissections just in me for that long, no symptoms whatsoever. And that was kind of the interesting part that a lot of doctors said was that these dissections were diagnosed asymptomatic, meaning I didn't go in with any issues. I didn't
Right.
have any pain. I didn't have anything. I was seemingly completely healthy. It was kind of a freak chance of this imaging done that led it to it, because if I hadn't had it done, I still might not know that I had this going on.
Yeah.
Um, so
So are they just
that
watching those now?
they're watching it for now. I go in every 6 months and get scans done up at the University of Washington. Um, and the good news is that they're not expanding at all. So what their plan of action right now is just to watch it, and as long as it stays that way, I'm fortunate enough that the dissections are allowing the blood to flow fairly naturally, so it's not causing an aneurysm or any kind of blockage. So
Oh, good.
yeah, so that's, I mean, the best case scenario of what it could be. So
Yeah.
they're just going to watch it at this point and continue imaging and scanning to stay on top of it.
So you said you had a 13-year-old
Yes, I have twins actually, 13-year-old
twins.
twins.
And were they tested after you tested positive for VEDS?
They were. So once I got my diagnosis, of course, the geneticist informed me that, you know, kids have a 50 for 50 chance of inheriting it. So we took them both in, um, and they also did a echo on both of the kids as well while we were in there. And so
Mm-hmm.
they did my daughter first, and her echo came back fine. And they did my son right after that, and they noticed that in his echo he had what's called a bicuspid valve, which is basically you have three valves in your heart to help pump, and two of his were kind of fused together.
Oh,
So while that in itself is not a huge issue, in fact, it kind of runs on my husband's side of the family, so it wasn't shocking news to hear that.
yeah.
Um, and typically nothing really ever needs to be done with it. Because of the chance of having VEDS, it just brought up a little bit more concern, because again, it's putting more strain on the arteries and the valves. So that was, that was a little concerning when we got that. And then they had their blood test. And because the doctors knew exactly what to look for, those results came back a lot quicker. It only took about a week or two to get the results.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the call, and the doctor told us that our daughter tested negative, that she did not have it. However, my son's results came back, and he also tested positive for vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
So they're fraternal twins?
They are fraternal. Yep.
And
Hmm.
how did that feel? I know you said you felt kind of validated when you got your results. How did it feel when you got your son's?
It was completely devastating to me. Um, I tell people all the time that I didn't cry when I got the results for myself, but I cried harder than I ever did when my son's results came back in. It just absolutely devastated me. And I felt so guilty because I felt like, even though logically I know there was nothing I could have done, I felt guilty that I gave this to him,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's still, when I think about it and when I think about the emotional aspect of it, I get way more emotional when I talk about him and his journey than I do about my own.
Has he had any complications yet?
He is very fortunate. He hasn't had any complications. We live close enough to Seattle, which is amazing. So we get excellent care, and we're able to go up to the University of Washington and Seattle Children's quite regularly for all
Mm-hmm.
his appointments. So we were just up there a few weeks ago for his 6-month checkup, and he's doing well. He's got a little bit of enlargement in the aorta, but nothing to where they're concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just going to do the same and kind of keep an eye on him. I think the hardest part for him is kind of the change in lifestyle that he's had to adjust to
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, because, he went through the first, you know, 11 years of his life with no restrictions whatsoever because we didn't know anything. And so he was able to do the sports that he wanted, like football and wrestling and the high contact sports that he enjoyed doing. And, we kind of had to talk to him a little bit about this and be like, those aren't the best choice for you right now.
Yeah.
And that's been hard. I mean, there's nothing harder than sitting in a doctor's appointment and having your son get so emotional about the fact that he can't play a sport that he loves anymore. It breaks your heart as a mother to see. And but at the same time, as a parent, we have a job to keep him safe. And we're struggling with that. We're trying to find a good balance of how do we keep him safe but not put him in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
How do we still let him be a kid, and not be fearful but still be proactive in his choices.
Yeah.
And he's done really good. He wears a medical ID bracelet now, and um, he lets his school know. And one of the great things was just last week we were at a wrestling event for my daughter, who is in the sport right now, and that was a sport he did last year, but he's not doing it anymore, and he's been great. He'll still go and sit and cheer her on. And we were
Oh.
at a match last week, and one of the other wrestlers on his team came up and sat by him and asked him, he's like, hey, why aren't you wrestling anymore? And I was kind of sitting next but a little bit away, and so I was listening but trying not to show I was listening because I wanted to see like how he was going to handle it. And I was eavesdropping as a mom. And he did so well. He told this kid, and he said, well, I can't play anymore because I have a medical condition. And he kind of left it at that at first, and then the kid, being a kid, was like, well, what do you got? What is it? And and he did such a great job explaining. He's like, well, it's this thing called vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And of course the kid was like, what's that? I've never heard of that. And he said, well, it's this condition that I have. And the way he explained it was kind of like how we originally explained it to him. And he said, well, we all have genes in our body, and there's a gene that kind of it's like the glue in our body. And while most people have the super glue, he goes, mine's a little different, and it's more like Elmer's glue. And I was like, that's such a great way to describe it. I love it. And he was like, so I have to be careful because things inside of me and my organs and my arteries can can get damaged a lot easier than other people.
Oh.
And it was heartbreaking to hear, but I was so proud of him too, because I was like, oh, he gets it. Like he might not always like it, and he might get upset and he might get mad, but he gets it.
Yeah. That's so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, Elmer's glue.
I know. Well, it was a little, he actually upgraded it, because I think when I told him the scenario, I think I said, we're like the dollar store glue.
And he decided that that was the
He's like,
equivalent of
no,
Elmer's.
yes, we're going to be Elmer's glue.
That is so funny. So, are you the first in your family, or I mean, with your brother being affected and you being affected, I'd imagine that you guys had a parent that was
Yeah,
affected.
so I mean, I'm the first confirmed diagnosis of it. My brother they weren't able to test him, but the doctors are like, yeah, that's obviously what he had. My mom passed away in 2014, very suddenly as well. She was healthy as well. But it didn't raise as much concern because she was older. She was 61 at the time.
Hmm.
But she um, woke up with some chest pains, and they took her in, and she had a heart attack, and it wasn't a severe one, but there was enough to where they felt they wanted to put a stent in. So they went in and did that, and everything went smoothly. However, once they were done, she stopped breathing during the operation, and they weren't able to intubate her fast enough, and so she died from respiratory distress. Um, so that was devastating in itself, because that was really the first close loss at that point that I had had. So she was never genetically confirmed. However, talking with the doctors that I've talked to and giving them her medical history and the physical features that she had, and like I said, the easy bruising as well, and the thin kind of translucent skin, and all those things, it's pretty evident that she was the one that had it. My
Hmm.
father got tested after I was diagnosed, and he was negative for it. So the chances that both my brother and I had freak mutations is pretty rare. So we're pretty confident that it came from my mom.
And how has your dad handled this?
He's handling it really good. I think he's kind of like me in that he likes to know facts, and he likes to go off of facts and everything like that. So I'm really open with him, and I'll tell him, the appointments that I've had, and things that are going on. And I can tell that it's really hard for him. He likes to read up as much as possible on things, and he'll talk to me about it. So I think emotionally, I think that's kind of how he's dealing with it, is just getting as much information as he can.
Hmm.
But I can't even put myself in his shoes. I mean, he's lost his wife and his son, and then now his daughter and grandson also have this. So, I mean, I can't imagine emotionally he's dealing with all that.
Yeah. Is he pretty supportive?
He's very supportive, very supportive. Yeah.
That's good. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with the listeners that you didn't touch on? I know we talked about some things that you've experienced and that probably are amplified by VEDS, and talked about your
Hmm.
dissections and everything like that. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you wanted to share, or any advice
Um.
for somebody who's just going through this? It was pretty
Oh
recent that you
gosh.
were diagnosed.
Yeah, I was gonna say advice is hard. I'm still taking all the advice I can get, it seems like, and I think I probably probably will for a very long time. Um, Honestly, like as cheesy as it sounds, I just honestly take every day as it comes, because there are days where having this feels like a ticking time bomb inside, you know, and I have to choose every day if I'm going to let that fear and anxiety run my day, or if I'm going to run my day. And a lot of the times, I'm choosing to run my day, and it feels good. And I guess my advice, if I could give anybody, would be like, you know, you're no different today than you were yesterday. I have to remind myself that I'm no different before this diagnosis than I
Hmm.
was after it. I'm still the same person. I'm still, living my life, and my life is already planned out for me. Like it's going to be what it's going to be, and I can choose to either embrace it and run with it or be in fear of it. And, I do choose to embrace it. And on the days that the fear is stronger, I've just got to rely on the fact that, it's, it is what it is. And, I want to live this life to the fullest. And I want to especially show my kids that, this isn't the end of the world for me and that I'm going to make the most of it. And um, so, yeah, I guess that would be, if any advice would be just to, take everything day by day and it's going to be okay. But
Yeah, it's a scary thing to have too, and to have to work through that can be so difficult.
yeah, it is. And,
Yeah.
and it does make you think differently, and things that come up in the future, I do have to think differently, like any procedures that I might have done, any surgeries or anything that I might have done in the future. It does make me have to think a little bit more because there are added risks with patients with VEDS, with surgeries and anesthesia and everything like that. And so you do have to be more cautious about it, but at the same time, you don't need to let it hold you back and hold you back from having a good life.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with everybody and with me.
Oh,
I
well, thank you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. At the beginning of my search, when I was looking, these podcasts were one thing that um, just made me feel really good. They really made me feel like there were other people out there that can relate to how I'm feeling, and it validated a lot of how I felt. And I just hope that my story can do the same someday for others that are listening that might be going through the same thing.
That's so sweet. When I started doing these, I really like that was my thought, like that's what I wanted to do was when I was diagnosed, I felt really, really alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really want
Absolutely.
anybody else to feel that. So I'm so glad that you were able to find these.
Absolutely. It absolutely. That's exactly. I mean, I just felt like I wasn't alone when I heard those and I heard everybody else's stories, and it was such a comfort to me. So thank you for that.
Well, I think I should thank everybody else that has shared their story.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's just been
Absolutely.
wonderful to do this and hear everybody's stories and have them share it is so special to me. So I'm really grateful that you are doing the same, and I'm sure that there's somebody else out there that can totally relate to what you're experiencing. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for listening. This was Staying Connected, and this was Megan sharing her story with vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. This is a monthly podcast that comes out on the last Sunday of the month. So go ahead and subscribe to this if you want to hear more, and we'll see you soon.